If you're going to build cabinets, probably going to use plywood or some other kind of sheet stock. So let's talk through an approach or two that's going to help make your parts consistent, help you get good cut quality, so when you put the cabinets together, everything goes the way you want it to. Now, first thing, I'm going to be making these cuts with a circ saw on a track, so we have to think about which side should be up. Remember that a circ saw cuts up, so as a result, we want good face down, bad face up. So first thing, I'm going to flip this over. Now, when I'm teaching my cabinet making classes, there are some things I really try to get my students to understand, and one of them is the idea that consistency is often more important than accuracy. As it affects cabinet making, what I mean by that is that when we cut our case sides, which we're going to do in a second, we really want to make sure every case side is exactly the same size. Every top and bottom are exactly the same size. So a lot of that comes to how you use the tools, how you think through this process. Before we get to that, first step, we need to square an end off on the plywood. You can't rely on the plywood being perfectly square. You got to make it square. So, using a framing square, I'm going to strike a line. And then with the track, for my track saw, the edge of that blue guide is exactly where the blade is going to cut. So I can put that right on my pencil line, just like that. And it's pretty cool. There's a sticky strip on the bottom of this guide. So as a result, I don't even have to clamp it in place. All I have to do is make the cut. That gives us a nice square end. Now, I'm going to mark that end because that's the end I just cut. It's good to keep track of that. I'm also going to mark the edge closest to me because that's the edge I squared from. That's going to come into play in just a little bit. And what I can do now is, because that end is already square, I can measure and measure. And then use my track again. Now the observant among you are going to notice that the saw blade is on this side of the cut. So when I marked out this length, I allowed for the width of the saw blade because we're about to take that off of the case side. Now on the case side of the cut, because the track's not over that, our cut quality is good, but not necessarily great. And that's okay, because that's the inside of the cabinet and the top and bottom are going to cover that. With the top and bottom, we're going to treat things a little bit differently. Case sides are done. I'm going to take this off cut and flip it around. And the reason I'm doing that is so that when I make my cut for the top and bottom, the track will cover the piece I'm keeping, giving me great cut quality there. So, second verse, same as the first. Mark, track, cut. on this one, you can really see that cut quality is great because we have a zero clearance effect that comes from the track. Now let's go back to this consistency is more important than accuracy. Here's what we just did. If I'm making kitchen uppers that are 11¼ inches wide, which is what we're doing, I can get 4 of those out of this piece, 4 of those out of that piece. So by doing this approach, I just cross-cut 4 pieces to exactly the same length, and those 4 pieces to exactly the same length. So even if they're a little bit off of the measurement I want, they're all exactly the same, and that's what's really critical. Going to do a little setup change here, and the next thing we'll do is start ripping these to width. Remember, we started this process by squaring an end on the plywood. Now in a similar vein, the other thing you want to keep in mind is we want to eliminate all the factory edges from the pieces. So the next thing we're ready to do is rip our parts to width. But don't just measure from the edge and make a cut, because we want to get rid of that factory edge. So I want 11¼ inch pieces, because that's how deep kitchen uppers are. But I'm not going to set at 11¼ now. I'm going to set a little bit oversized. 11¾ is going to be just fine. Rip the parts oversized, then come back and finish them at their final width. Same thing to the piece, that's for the tops and bottoms. Then we'll come back and do our cuts to get them down to their final width. I've got both parts cut, and now we've got pieces that are a little bit oversized in width, so I can reset my rip guide to 11¼ That's the finished width of our cabinets. Now what I'm doing is working off of the cut edge. So I'm going to follow that edge I just cut, take these parts down to their final size. Same process for the part that's my cabinet top and bottom. In fact, same process for all of our parts. So again, what's cool about this is that we're not cutting the pieces until we're ready to cut all the pieces. So this approach that I showed you here is going to guarantee that all the sides are the same length, all the tops and bottoms are the same length, then each of those pieces is also the same width. Even if they're not the exact number you wanted, you're going to be okay because they're all going to be identical, because consistency is often more important than accuracy. So this is a good approach. I use it all the time for getting your plywood cut to size when you're building cabinets. Follow this procedure. It's a great recipe, and it's going to help make your cabinets more accurate, more consistent.